like things have slowed down a little bit with folks being in the waiting room, so I'll go ahead and get started. First off, thank you to everyone for attending. This is our first, the Center for Wildlife Studies' first Wildlife Wednesday of 2025. It's impressive. We have, well over 70 registrants today from time zones, at least across North America. It's pretty exciting to see. That's one of the challenges with these programs is that aren't limited to one time zone. So we appreciate folks. I'm actually in Alaska, and Amanda, you're in Utah, I believe, right?
Yep.
So we're well representing the West. So just so everyone knows, we are recording this presentation. We'll record all these part of the Wildlife Wednesday program, and then we'll add them to our YouTube channel. And there's a link to that playlist at the bottom of the chat currently. As for today, I am happy to introduce Amanda Mumford, who I've had the pleasure of working with for about 5 years, I believe now. Hard to believe the math sometimes, but sorry, I'm still letting folks in on the side here. Yep, so Amanda received her bachelor's in science and wildlife biology from the University of Michigan, and then made her way to Alaska, where I can say she had some jobs that I was envious of, to say the least. And then at some point, she decided to pursue a master's degree at the University of Alaska, Anchorage, working with Dr. Jeff Welker, who was a big collaborator of Alaska Department of Fish and Game, which is where I was working at the time, and how I came to know Amanda. Jeff approached us about developing a master's program with Amanda that was building on some of our ongoing grizzly bear research and game management at 13, if folks are familiar with that, in South Central Alaska. And I'm sure Amanda will describe that in much more detail for us. I'm going to leave it to Amanda to describe more of her project and some of the background. I just want to give a quick introduction, but I did want to note that there's a link to the first paper to be published from her thesis, which she successfully defended. It's been a while now. And currently she's a research associate with West Inc. in Utah again. So please feel free to check out that paper. And although admittedly it wasn't part of the plan, I did want to make a note that this is Women's History Month, and trying to make some emphasis on women in STEM, the STEM fields. And especially in our current climate, it's exceedingly important to support people in the sciences, despite the ongoing attacks with the current administration. I'll leave that at that for now. A couple housekeeping items. Be sure everyone should have been muted when they joined the talk. Please try and keep those muted. We will have time for a Q&A session at the end with Amanda. So if you have questions, maybe hold off till then or put them in the chat as we go. I did include some other chats, and there are some other links to articles about women in STEM and Women's History Month. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Amanda and mute myself. Take it away, Amanda.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. And Jeff, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. I'm not sure if others can, but nothing's showing up on my end. So hopefully other people can, if there are links there.
I posted them before it started, so maybe I'll just repost them while you're going.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is, Amanda Mumford. Thank you, Jeff, for the introduction, a little bit of background. Currently a wildlife biologist with Western Ecosystems Technology. This talk is on some of my thesis work, like Jeff mentioned, on grizzly bear behavior. I'm unfortunately not doing much grizzly bear work anymore, much more kind of bird and bat biologist, I would say, but excited to spend the afternoon or evening, wherever you guys are, talking about bears for a bit. So let me just go ahead, go through the painful process here of sharing my screen. I'll just bear with me for a moment. Let's see, I think I want to swap this. And hopefully, if someone could give maybe a thumbs up, you're seeing or Jeff, hopefully you're seeing my presentation. Yes, amazing. Okay, cool. Well, let's get started. So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about the paper that we recently published in the journal Ursus, titled Grizzly Bear Behavior in South Central Alaska, Use of a Hidden Markov Model to Assess Environmental and Anthropogenic Variables on Behavior. And so a little bit of background, starting off kind of broadly. just with some background on animal behavior. So for kind of the effective management or conservation of any animal species, really benefits from an understanding of that species behavior within its natural environments. And quantifying animal behavior and how these different external or internal factors can affect wildlife can provide really useful insights to wildlife managers, and can additionally allow managers a better understanding of certain movement drivers, such as seasonal changes in vegetation, prey availability, the presence of competitors, and also the distribution of possible mates. And really expanding our kind of understanding of animal behavior is especially important because we're having these rapid land use changes and disturbances that are happening really around the globe, such as large-scale resource extractions or climatic events like large wildfires, excessive fall or spring snow events, and really just the ongoing rapid warming of the boreal and Arctic region. So it's really important to understand how animals are behaving in the face of all of these different changes. And so bear behavior in particular, there's been quite a bit of research on bear behavior. And from previous research, we know that typically bears will kind of partition their time between resting, foraging, and traveling, with some more event-based behaviors, such as hunting or periods of mating. And the proportion of time individuals are spending in these behavior states can vary and can often reflect different life history traits or individual knowledge, so such as lone females or females with cubs. And landscape properties, environmental factors, or anthropogenic disturbances may also influence bear behavior, and also the amount of time that they're spending in these certain behavior states. So there are some other studies. The study from 2016 found that food availability and weather events affected when grizzly bears were entering and exiting their dens, and the different anthropogenic disturbances such as vehicle traffic, road density, and human outdoor recreation have also been shown to affect bear behavior. Another different study from 2016 showed that bears altered their behavior in response to human outdoor trail and recreation use, and that can lead to things like potential decreasing in foraging for bears. And so with these different landscape changes that are happening, they're happening exceedingly rapid or exceedingly more in Alaska. Alaska has experienced the effects of climate change really twice as fast as the lower 48 states have. From this picture here, you can see that portions of the state have increased anywhere from 2 to 6 degrees just from 1970. In the area that we're focusing on, kind of that south central Alaska area, has increased by anywhere from 3.6 to 3.7 degrees in just the past 50 years. And this increase in temperature can have pretty large effects on the landscape, such as increasing things like wildfires and how animals are using the landscape, what resources are available to them, and really just what the quality of those resources are. And this can potentially affect things like where bears are denning, where ungulates are calving, overall diet composition, and overall behavior of the bears. And so we wanted to look at these things, these different environmental and anthropogenic factors, to see if they are affecting grizzly bear behavior or not. And so we hypothesized that within a given sex, the time spent by bears resting, foraging, and traveling would be pretty similar between individuals and would show similar shifts as different resources become available. Additionally, we hypothesized that male bears would spend more time in a traveling state than females due to differences in home ranges and metabolic needs. And so for this study, it took place in Game Management Unit 13, like Jeff previously mentioned. For those outside of Alaska that are maybe not familiar with game management units, this is the area in south central Alaska, just kind of northeast of Anchorage and a bit south of Fairbanks. It's a really large area. Doesn't look like it takes up that much space on the map, but it's a pretty massive area. It's a landscape the size of roughly West Virginia, so just over 23,000 square miles. And it's a really diverse landscape. Lots of different rivers, streams, and tributaries that flow throughout it. surrounded by multiple mountain ranges, the Chugach Mountains to the south, we have Talkeetna to the west, Alaska Range to the north, and then the Wrangels and St. Elias mountain ranges to the east. And it has many lakes and ponds throughout it as well. And so having such a really wide variety of landscapes, this area is really high quality grizzly bear habitat. In addition to things like abundant berries and herbaceous resources, it's also home to the Nauchina caribou herd, which is estimated around 44,000 caribou in 2020. And this is a really important food resource for the grizzly bears in the area, as well as the 5 salmon species that are present in all of the major rivers. Additionally, this game management unit provides really significant food resources for Alaskans. It's pretty easily accessible for recreation and hunters, and it's pretty heavily managed by the Department of Fish and Game due to those reasons. And so to figure out what the bears are doing and how they're behaving, we needed to gather some data on them. So we captured and collared bears by using a fixed-wing aircraft to locate the bears and then immobilized them via a DART system. While on the ground with the bears, we determined the sex of the animal, took multiple morphometric measurements, fitted a GPS collar, and collected tissue samples such as hair and blood. Our collars were programmed to collect locations every hour, and then that data was automatically uploaded into this database where we could go in and download it and start cleaning it up and using it. And so to answer our objectives, to figure out what behaviors they were, or what behavior states they were in, we used this model called a hidden Markov model. I'm not going to go into the weeds too much of this model, but overarching, it's this time series model with 2 different components. The first component consisting of this series of observations, so the GPS data, and the second component is this underlying non-observable state sequence, which is this hidden state, and that's what they're doing. And so this hidden state is correlated and can take on a number of discrete values. So this model essentially uses the hourly GPS data and is able to parse out these different behavior states based on the step lengths or how kind of quickly they're moving from point A to point B, and the turning angles of the bear, or how often they're turning within their space. Additionally, we can input different environmental or anthropogenic covariates into this model to see if they are potentially affecting the bear behavior. And from this model, we were able to parse out these 3 distinct behaviors. So resting, state 1, state 2, foraging, and then state 3, traveling. And here are some of those environmental and anthropogenic variables that we were interested in looking at to see if they were impacting bear behavior or not. So things such as elevation, what land cover type they were in, temperature, and then different anthropogenic variables as well, such as distance to roads or if it was caribou or moose hunting season. So diving into some results from this model. So we were able to gather location data on 12 bears, and we tracked them for an average of roughly 250 days. Pictured here are the 12 bears' movements ranging from June 2021 through July 2022. Just looking at their location data, we found that the male grizzly bears had roughly twice the size, twice as large home ranges compared to the females, and that the females tend to have just a more really tight-knit home range. See if I can use my little laser pointer here. Yes. So here you can see like this light purple one, like that would have been a male. He's really wandering and going all over the place. And then this pink one or this purple one here, those are females. They tend to stay within an area that they know and don't leave that as frequently. And those results are pretty consistent with findings from the literature that's been documented many, many times before and is hypothesized as the large difference in these home ranges is due to males just roaming a larger area, potentially searching for a mate, or also that males are on average just larger than females and therefore have additional metabolic needs that they are perhaps searching for additional food resources. And so we were interested in also just how bears were spending their time in general. So pictured here is a bar chart with the proportion of time spent within a certain state, so that resting, foraging, and traveling state for both males and females. And we found that both males and females spent a pretty similar amount of time in each behavior state. Males spent a little bit more time foraging, and females spent a little bit more time resting. Males in general were more likely to be kind of on the move, so traveling and foraging, than females. And we, again, going back to the home ranges, think this is probably due to males being on average larger than females, therefore requiring more food to meet their metabolic needs, and just traveling more than the females. Male bears are also documented to display farther dispersal distance behaviors and just roam farther to find mates than females do, all of which can contribute to that increased foraging and traveling time. When looking at male and female behavior and how they kind of spend their time within a given day, we found that both males and females showed this kind of bimodality in activity throughout the day. So they're most active in the morning and early afternoon, and then late evening. So here we have, essentially it's a 24-hour clock. So with this 0:24 being midnight and 12 being noon for both males and females, and then those different states broken up with resting, foraging, and traveling. That bimodality has been also documented in bears before via GPS location data, and is suspected to be either kind of a thermoregulatory strategy or possible avoidance of human activity. And by being most active during the morning and late evening, bears can avoid the hottest part of the day and maintain that thermoneutrality by seeking shade or water bodies and decreasing activity. And additionally, by being active during the morning and late evening, bears can avoid an influx of potential anthropogenic disturbances, such as people out recreating, increased traffic, things like that. Within our study area, Game Management Unit 13, anthropogenic disturbances, so things like hiking, camping, hunting, have been pretty rapidly increasing, which can result in an increase in bear-human encounters, and potentially by selectively choosing when to be active during the day, bears can ideally avoid both the heat and human disturbances. And we're interested in looking at bear behavior over the course of months, over the course of time, how it was changing. And so here we have, again, those kind of 24-hour clocks. This is just for males. And we did find over the course of the summer that their males and females differed in kind of their seasonal trends of behavior. So as the summer progressed, from around May to August, the time males spent traveling increased by 89%, foraging by 44%, and resting decreased by 69%. And for females, we found that kind of similar patterns, but that traveling increased by 66%, and there was a 41% decrease in resting, and foraging stayed pretty consistent as the summer progressed. And this kind of trend of decreased resting led to a virtual loss of that bimodality that we were seeing, such that most of the day from hours 5 to 22 was spent either foraging or traveling for the months of from around July through August for both sexes. And we think this is due to bears' seasonally accelerating need to forage sufficiently to accumulate fat for the winter and to prep for hibernation. And they go through this process called hyperphagia, where they are really just solely focused on eating food as much as they can and can consume up to like 20,000 kilocalories a day. And they're just spending all of their time searching and consuming food, leading to a lot less time resting and more time foraging and traveling. Additionally, we think that this could be because of, as the summer is progressing, different food resources are becoming available. So things such as berries are sprouting up, salmon are spawning, and different herbaceous forage is also coming up, which could lead to also an increase in that foraging that we're seeing. And so we wanted to look at those environmental and anthropogenic variables to see how they were potentially affecting bear behavior. When looking at those, elevation, temperature, and distance to road had the strongest influence on bear behavior. So here we have elevation on the X, and then the probability of a bear being within a given state based off the elevation. So we have males and females. So at lower elevations, both males and female bears were more likely to be in a foraging state. And kind of as elevation increased, traveling increased rapidly and foraging decreased rapidly. And there's a study from this area, an older study from 1997, that found that bears in this area really rarely used these higher elevation sites. However, we found that these bears, and males in particular, really liked the higher elevation sites and used them more than we previously thought. We think this could be due to multiple factors, such as potential seasonal caribou availability, potential caribou gut piles left over from hunters. Caribou will generally move to these higher elevations as the summer is progressing to avoid heat, biting insects, also while foraging on kind of that new vegetation that's coming up from the snowmelt. And bears could potentially be following that really important prey resource. Additionally, at higher elevations, there is a decrease in vegetation forage diversity and abundance. So bears may also just be at those higher elevations, traveling more, traveling longer distances to obtain food while at those higher elevations, and perhaps traveling more to get back down to lower elevations. We found that here we have temperature. We found that temperature affected both females and males, and that as it became warmer, bears were more likely to be in a resting or foraging state. And as it became colder, they were more likely to be traveling. Other studies have also shown that habitat selection by bears is really greatly influenced by ambient temperature. And when temperatures are at their warmest, bears will typically choose locations that will provide them with thermal shelter while also providing them with some foraging opportunities. Additionally, temperature can really play an important role and can act as a proxy for forage and vegetation availability. Its phenology and how it changes with increasing temperatures. And when plants are exposed to increasing temperatures, their phenology can rapidly accelerate, leading to shorter growing periods and potentially less quality forage for bears. We did find that at colder temperatures tended to affect females more than males. Females were 22% more likely to be in a traveling state at cold temperatures than males. And we think this potentially comes back to that idea of just body size differences, and that males are larger than females, potentially enabling them to maintain a constant body temperature more easily than females can. The last variable we have here is distance to road that really affected bear behavior. And we found that distance to the nearest road affected male behavior more than females. When males were closest to the roads, they were more likely to be in a traveling state, where females were when females were closer to roads, they were more likely to be in a foraging or traveling state and least likely to be resting. Roads can really act as either an attractant for some bears. They can provide, easy movement corridors for them to move from point A to point B. They can provide really good quality forage on the side of roads as well. Things such as ants, berries, and sedges can also provide potential ungulate roadkills for scavenging opportunities. The roads can also really pose as a barrier for some bears and can alter bear behaviors and movements in areas with higher road densities or higher traffic volume. We included caribou and moose hunting season in the model. It didn't have a large impact on bear behavior like we thought it would, but our results did show that females during hunting season were most likely to be in a traveling state, while males were most likely to be in a foraging state. The probability of being in a resting state decreased for females based on whether it was hunting season or not, but did not affect the male's resting state. There's been a lot of studies done, especially in Europe, on Scandinavian bears that have shown that bears will avoid areas that are associated with hunting, and that hunting seasons can result in different foraging strategies for bears. And within our game management unit, it really receives a pretty high density influx of hunters, with approximately 4,000 caribou and there's like 850 moose being harvested each year out of this game management unit. So it could potentially be affecting bear behavior. We just weren't able to pick it up on this model. I'm kind of wrapping some things up. So our findings from this analysis really show kind of the power of using location data and movement models for grizzly bears, and are the first of their kind for bears in South Central Alaska, depicting these seasonal and sex-based movement differences. For future studies, an increased sample size would be great, although the limited number of individual animals used in this analysis doesn't fully capture, population-wide trends or individual patterns in this bear population. Our sample size was able to distinguish important behavior discoveries from this predator. And a larger sample would obviously provide just greater detail of individual sex and age-based variability. Additionally, doing something like employing camera collars, so GPS collars that have a video camera attached to them, would be really interesting to verify how well the model is parsing out these various behavior states. So when the model says the bear is foraging or traveling, is the bear actually doing that or not? Another meaningful addition to this analysis would be adding more covariates to it, especially things like a measure of primary plant productivity. So using things like NDVI data to see how bears might react to plant phenology on a landscape or on a finer scale. Lastly, like I've mentioned, there's a pretty extensive off-road vehicle system, trail system throughout this game management unit, but it's really unknown kind of the extent and the usage of those trails by both bears and by humans, by people recreating. So quantifying human use on the landscape could provide really useful insights on how grizzly bears are potentially responding to these different stressors. And that's kind of a summary of my paper that we've published. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the results or methods. I'm happy to answer any bear questions or any questions in general. So thank you guys.
Thanks, Amanda. Can you see the questions in the chat, or should I read them out?
I think I can probably pull them up here. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I see one from Eugene. So can you describe how the graphs were produced? Okay, yeah, so I can go back to it, maybe. So Eugene, I think you're talking about these graphs, the activity clocks. So Move HMM does not produce these graphs. So I was able to pull out, this is something I did in R. So the model does produce these hourly, it assigns basically a state, so resting, foraging, or traveling for each hour. And then I was able to extract that data from the Move HMM model and then threw it into another code that I have written to produce these figures here. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions to that. Any locations that bear visited that were surprising? I mean, bears are always doing funny things. Like here we can look at this figure, just an outline of kind of their movements. You can see, let me turn on my laser pointer again. You can see, some bears are just wandering all over the place. This is a pretty major highway here. This bear was just hanging out by the highway, going back and forth. there's no major cities or anything in this part of Alaska. Anchorage is all the way over here. The next biggest one would be kind of Glen Allen, or gosh, I don't remember the name of the city over here, but it's not big. So it's all pretty wild wilderness out here. I will say there were some bears that I can't really see here, but I think there was one bear, maybe this purple bear, that swam like 3 or 4 miles across the lake, or at least that's what its GPS track looks like it did. So not crazy for a bear to do, but kind of surprising. Yeah, Michaela. So, how many of the females have cubs? Yes, there were. Let's see, I don't think I have it in my results here. There was at least 1 or maybe 2 females that did have cubs. And we didn't see, I did run a separate model. So for the models, I ran both a male model and a female model. And I did run a separate model to see if the females with cubs were behaving differently than the regular females. And there was nothing very noteworthy there, as far as how they were spending their time or how things were impacting or what variables were impacting them. But I think again, that just leads back to, there was only 2 of those bears. And I think both of the females that did have cubs, they were 2nd year cubs or 2nd year offspring, so not cubs of the year. So perhaps having more bears or cubs of the year could potentially affect behavior for sure. Yeah, so how could you tell if they had cubs? So either when we put collars on them, sometimes they had cubs with them. Or also we would go out and fly surveys after we would collar them to verify that the collars were in working order, or potentially pick up some collars that may have fallen off. So we would see if they had cubs with them then or not, and we could ideally age them. And no, not tracking them in a different way. All collars were set up the same way, but we wouldn't put collars on the cubs, just the adults. Yeah, Douglas. So hourly intervals. Yeah, so there's been a lot of multiple different papers on the timing for a hidden Markov model to really work well. Like if you have GPS data that's 4 hours, that's not ideal. You really want the shorter time intervals to be able to parse out these different behavior states. And we did have some bears that had 4-hour data, and we tried running it on those, and it just did not come out very well. So I do think the hourly intervals definitely made a big difference. It really cleaned up the errors that when we ran the model, you get an output of different errors, and it really tightened all of those up nicely. I think even if you could do shorter intervals, half hour would be amazing.
Any other questions? Right. Oh, there we go.
Let's see, Eugene. So with just 12 bears, rising to you. It's a good question. I don't know if it was necessarily surprising to me. Let's see, let's look at some of those environmental variable results. So yeah, all of and I can't remember what the errors are on these, but all of them are pretty tight for the most part. Some of them do start to get a little bit wonky in some areas, but they're pretty consistent, like you said, across sex. There are some differences, of course, but I don't know. That's a great question. I would have to think on that a little bit more, Eugene. Jeff, do you have any insights, any input on that? The other bear expert here?
There's other bear experts on the call besides me. I would think some of it just is the plasticity that bears display. They're just such intelligent animals and really the supreme generalists. So it's not too surprising that they would respond, similarly across the conditions that they were exposed to here. I'm sure would vary much greater if there were, concentrated resources like, salmon spawning, that kind of
Yeah,
thing could lead to more distinct behaviors by sex or reproductive class. That'd just be a guess.
yeah, yeah, great, thank you. Let's
Hey,
see.
Amanda, I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. It was very interesting. One of your last slides, you hinted at the value of camera collars and being able
Mm,
to kind of validate the behavior of bears when they're moving through the landscape.
yeah.
And I was curious how you were distinguishing between traveling and foraging. Were you relying on the model to do that for you, or were you have activity sensors or accelerometers?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So mostly model, yes. So the model was determining these different states based off of their step lengths and their turning angles. So if their step lengths were a certain, I can't remember the exact cutoffs for each state, but within a given hour, if they have not moved more than 10 meters, say, it would assign it a resting state. Or if it was maybe only kind of meandering around 10 to 100 meters within a given hour, we would say it was foraging. So these collars that we had the data from, we didn't have any accelerometers on them that I'm aware of. We were just assigning states based off of their movements.
Thanks. That's good to know.
Yeah, and that's why I think, doing something like camera collar could be really useful. If the model is saying that the bear is resting or the bear is foraging or traveling, is it really doing those things or not? Okay, let's see a few more questions in the chat. I'm interested in recording heart rate along with location. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe others on this call know more than I do, as far as heart rate, how you could record that within a collar. I'm not sure if that's an option or not. Would definitely be really interesting though. I do know that collars record, how fast an animal is going and record external things like temperature. But I'm not sure about heart rate or like internal factors, but would be really interesting if that is a possibility.
There can be surgical implants that
Yeah.
tie to the collar, recording those things. Yeah.
Okay.
Although you
Stan.
could touch, Amanda, on how this could affect or be interwoven with your diet work as well. That's another way to try and validate, so to speak, cautious use of the word validate, movement results, behavior results in light of how the resources are actually
Changing.
integrated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, let me get to Stan and then maybe I can touch on the diet stuff too. Let's see. Bears use more calories. This type of behavior in your study area. So let's see. So Stan, you're asking.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thanks for the presentation. And yeah, so generally, what I've observed here is we get the bears that are coming out of the dens, and they're literally traveling up the highest of elevations. And I've never understood why they do that. When there are lower elevation mountain saddles that they could traverse through, they choose to traverse through the highest of the peaks. And I still don't understand why they might do that. And I just want to know if within your study area, if through your observations, were you witnessing this as well?
Yeah, like post den emergence, they're just going straight up essentially. It's a good question.
And potentially why they might do that, because
Yeah.
it seems that this is a routine circumstance year after year. And it's just interesting to me on why they do that, because to me, you would think they'd want to save their calories, yet they expend them.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure if we've observed that in this area. Maybe Jeff could chime in on that if he's noticed that with any of the other bears. I mean, we collared them when they're outside of, post-den emergence, but some of the collars we did have multi-year data for. So we would have captured when they're coming out of their dens. For this study, a lot of that right out of their den and right out of their den was kind of clipped. We didn't include that in the analysis. Just because they tended to kind of go out of the den, go back into the den. The data was just kind of messy right post den emergence. But I'm not entirely sure why they would do that. Potentially easier to travel, potential food resources, I'm not sure, unless, yeah, good question, Stan. I'll have to do some digging. Let's see. I mean, lots of good questions here. Awesome, John. Exciting about the deer. Mari, yes. Yes, it is fun to watch. Just check in on them and see what they're up to. Delia, yeah. Hi, Delia. Nice to see you here. Could potentially be avoidance behavior. Yeah, especially in this game management unit, bear hunting is open year round. So potentially avoidance behavior. Great. Okay, I hope I didn't miss any. Please holler if I did, if I missed a question.
I'll throw in something about the generalizability of the results, having worked mostly in Montana back in the day. This is a very different system compared especially to protected areas or anything involving grizzly bears in the lower 48. Like Amanda said, this is open year season, open hunting. There's no tag required, no license required. It's a lot of opportunistic hunting. They take 140 bears a year out of this unit, an average at 60,000 square kilometers, like Amanda said. So it's very heavily harvested. And season and year round, and visibility is great. There's not a lot of hiding cover in large portions of the unit. But the fact that it's not a protected population like Yellowstone is going to most likely lead to some pretty different behaviors, strategies, I would think.
Wow, great. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I missed that one. Well, if anyone has any other questions that they think of, I have my email here. Feel free to email me if you think of anything. Or if there's, anyone on the talk wants to talk women and wildlife. It is Women's History Month. Happy to talk anything about that as well. Thanks, Delia. Nice to see you.
Yeah, and as we're losing people here, just want to give another thank you to Amanda, first and foremost, for being our first victim of the year, so to speak. It's always great to hear more about her work. And I want to encourage folks to sign up. I put a link in there to our playlist on YouTube. You can subscribe to that. And also our next talk is on April 9th from Dr. Natalie Hamilton. She will discuss how natural history collections can advance conservation science. And just to make one more plug, especially during this time of really unprecedented attacks on education and transparency and accountability and evidence-based decision-making, it's more important than ever to try and make these educational opportunities and programs available to people globally. And that's part of the mission for CWS is to promote those opportunities and provide them. We're always trying to add new courses and professional certificate programs to help professionals and aspiring professionals to meet their goals. So encourage everyone to visit our site and sign up for our programs. If you have any questions, reach out to anyone at CWS anytime. We'd love to hear from people and or leave down suggestions for other talks like this that we can try and provide. And with that, unless there are other questions, we can call it a day. Thank you all again for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone.